Cav Cop here. In this video, I want to talk about the 223 Remington versus the 5.56 NATO. So let's go inside and go over this. Do you support freedom in firearms? If so, I assume that you're on Rumble. So if you are, do me a favor, subscribe to my channel. Give me a like. Drop some comments down below. Also, if you would, make sure you follow some other wonderful channels here on Rumble, like Therapy Range, Always Survives, and Dear Sarge. And I'll even put some other ones in the description links below so you can find better stuff to watch on Rumble, so you can move away from YouTube. Alright, so how many of you have been told that you can fire 223 in a 5.56, but you can't fire 5.56 in a 223? That's a thing that a lot of people put out. If you get a 5.56 chamber, then you can fire 223 in it. But if you have a 223, they say you can't fire a 5.56 in it. Is that true? I'm asking you, what do you think? What have you heard? Because today we're going to go with the 223 versus 5.56. We'll start off a little bit of history on it. Got a bunch of stuff to go over here today. I don't know if we're going to cover everything. I may just try and hit on the key points on this video and then do some more stuff later on. But this is just to get you thinking, and some of you out there might have the answers that we're looking for today. Let's dive deeper into this. Alright, so around, let's say 1957, the United States military and some others started looking at developing a new caliber. Something that was smaller than the 308 7.62 that was used by NATO. And one of the things they wanted was something that was smaller, something to replace possibly the M1 carbine or something like that. So they ended up looking at different things, and ultimately Armalite and an aviation company, Fairchild, got together and decided to work on something. You had Eugene Stoner with it, and some people from Sierra Bullets, along with Remington and some others. And they came together and developed a new rifle and a new round. And what they ended up ultimately coming up with was, they came up with the AR-15, the Armalite 15, which was a shrunk down version of the AR-10. They also ended up taking something like the 308, a rimless bottleneck round, and they ended up shrinking it down in size to be what was known as 223 Remington. It was based off the 222 Remington, which is a .222 Remington round used for varmint hunting. So they ended up making it a little bit bigger. It's known as 223, which a lot of people say is .224, but ultimately that became the 223 Remington. That was designed to become a military round, and when the military got it, they adapted it to 5.56 millimeter. So you have the 223 and the 5.56 round. The 223 and the 5.56, both made by Remington, both introduced in the late 50s, early 60s. And in 1960, a general decided he liked the AR-15. He was an Air Force general. He thought it was a nice light round, easy to shoot, low recoil, something good to replace the M1 carbines. It was light, it wasn't too heavy, the recoil didn't hurt their shoulders like the M14. So it kind of got adopted, and they ended up coming up with some different standards in ammo. Remington's first rifle that they introduced as a 223 was a pump action, I believe it was the 760. But it's just a pump action center fire that they have, similar to like an 870 shotgun, but in a rifle caliber. And that was the 223's big push by Remington, as far as I know. The military came out with it, obviously, in the AR-15, that ended up becoming the XM16 that became the M16, and that's a whole side story. But the original ammunition that the military came up with, they ended up calling the M193. Now the M193 rounds that they came up with were based on the 223 Remington. 223 Remington, M193, 5.56, same thing. Both rounds, same manufacturer. That's basically what you have. So the civilian side has the 223 and the military has the 5.56. For Vietnam and other cases, they ended up using the ammunition that they had, which was the M193 ball. This right here was a standard through Vietnam and through quite a while. It was designed to work with the AR-15 M16 rifle that at the time had a 1 in 12 twist. Most of the hunting rifles also had a 1 in 12 twist. And the 55 grain bullet did pretty well in it, but there were some issues and stuff like that. They ended up going to the table trying to create a NATO type round. And FN Herzl ended up being the ones that came up with a NATO round. It was originally called the SS-109, and the United States military ended up picking it up as the M855. So when it became a NATO round, it ended up going from the 55 grain bullet that they normally used to a 62 grain bullet. And a lot of people call it the green tips, but they ended up going to a 62 grain bullet that had a steel penetrator, and they ended up adjusting the rifle twist going from the 1 in 12 and to a 1 in 7. So the 1 in 7 twist is kind of the standard for a lot of 5.56s right now. But as you can see, things slowly evolved and changed. Now if we look back at the original 5.56 rounds, the regular tip, they end up shooting a 55 grain bullet. They shoot it at about 3,000 to 3,200 feet per second. The PSI rating on both the 223 and the original 5.56, that's going to be the non-NATO, non-green tip, is going to run at about 5,500 PSI. Some say 53, but between 53 and 5,500 PSI is what these are known to run at. When you get to the green tips, they end up running a little bit hotter, and they're going to be the ones that end up running close to 6,200 PSI. So you're looking at quite a jump in the PSI when you go to the more modernized, harder hitting rounds. But there's a reason for the change, to help stabilize the rounds and to help be able to penetrate more things. Alright, so if we're looking at the different ammunition, we can see that 5.56 NATO in the M855 or the SS-109 is a little bit different than the original 223 5.56 Remington that was made with the 55 grain ammo in the M193. So over time things have changed. My question that I don't know the answer to is there a difference between 223 Remington and M19 and M193? There's clearly a difference between M193 and the M855. The green tip ammo is definitely a NATO round. It's adopted, it's hotter. But the M193, is it? Because the only real difference between a 223 and a 5.56 is dimensions and PSI. When you get to the chambers, there's a bit of a difference on how the chambers are cut. And let's talk a little bit more about how the chambers end up fitting into this. Alright, so the chambers for a 223 are a little bit tighter. And the actual chamber part that goes in isn't really where the difference is. The major difference is in the throat, where the round ends up starting to feed into the actual barrel itself. But when it comes to 223 ammo, there's a lot of different options, hundreds of options probably, as far as the bullet weight, the grain, the tip, type of ammo. It's used by the civilian market for hunting and everything. When it comes to the military side, 5.56, you're a little bit more limited in what you get. 223s were more accurate than the 5.56 because they use a slightly tighter chamber. Where that throat goes, it's a little bit shorter on the 223. It's 0.125 longer, the throat area, on a 5.56. So a 5.56 can handle a little bit more pressure and gas. And as you know, when you shoot, the bullets kind of expand and things push forward. So the case mouth kind of seals better. So there's a concern if you end up firing 62,000 PSI 5.56 rounds NATO inside of a 223 chamber. To add to the confusion though, you have to realize back in the day, a lot of rifles that were AR-15 based were made in 223 more for accuracy. They wanted to make a 223 chamber because it was a more accurate chamber, and it wasn't something made for war where they worried about reliability as much as accuracy. The problem is, when you put a 5.56 NATO round into a 223 chamber, you run a chance of having what they call like a kaboom or an explosion, a catastrophic failure. Part of that might be the cheap casting and material they made stuff with. Another part of that is that the AR-15 is direct impingement, so all that gas comes back around and gets shot back down in the bolt and chamber area. So you could have an explosion from having too much PSI in that chamber area as well. When it comes to bolt action rifles, it's not so much of a huge issue. There's standard proof loads and stuff. People have been shooting 5.56 ammo out of 223 rifles for a long time without any major issues performance-wise. But people in AR-15s and stuff like that used to have kabooms. Nowadays, almost all the AR-15, M16 type things you find out there, they're going to have either a 5.56 chamber that can handle either one. They stopped making them in 223 for the most. Or you'll have something like the 223 Wild. The 223 Wild chamber is a modification that kind of fits in between the original 223 chamber design where the throat is and the 5.56 chamber design. So it allows stuff to feed more reliably, but also it allows it to shoot more accurately. Probably the best chamber out on the market right now is Novoseki. They make some really high-end nice rifles, and they probably have the best specs for a chamber, whatever it is. You'd have to look it up, and I'm sure somewhere out there it's going to be listed. But basically, Novoseki makes chambers that are great for firing full auto, for getting accuracy, for not overheating, not having cases stick, and so on. When we get to the 5.56, the chambers are a little bit more forgiving. They're meant for military use and everything. Then on 223, they're meant more for accuracy. So over the years, a lot of stuff has changed. If you have older ARs, you always want to check and see what the specs are on it. You also want to check and make sure what kind of ammo you're shooting. Like I said, the newer NATO ammo, and there's even stuff beyond the M855. They have M855A1 out that has kind of like a steel tip and all copper. It's a green round, but it has a little bit more heavy-hitting penetration to it. It's really a nice advance. Then you also have the Mark 2.62 rounds. And they came out, I think, around 2007 or 8. When we were in Iraq, we ended up getting issued them. They're a hollow point, 77 grain bullet. Flies a lot further and harder as far as hitting stuff down range. But everything has a pro and a con to it. But right now, the M855A1 ammo is probably some of the best stuff you can get. Very limited availability. It costs a lot. A lot of times you're better off going with the cheaper stuff. Rifle twist and design plays a lot on it as far as some of the weights of the bullets and stuff like that. And I think we'll get into a little bit more of this stuff in future videos possibly. But if you have the answers out there, I'd be kind of curious. What's the difference between 223 Remington and the M193 ball? Because when they came out, they were the exact same round. Only difference was the chambers. Now when FN came out with the NATO round, the 5.56 NATO, and ended up coming up with the SS109 and the M855, that's when the pressures went up, the round of the bullet, the grain of the bullet went up, and stuff really did change a bit. So if you know the difference, let me know down below. I've shot the 5.56 before out of my bolt actions. Now, the rifle I showed at the beginning of this thing, the Remington 700 I have, it's one of the PSS models, the Police Special Service ones. It does have a 1 in 9 twist, not a 1 in 12 twist. Remington's known for the 3 rings of steel that make their chambers some of the tighter and tougher chambers out there. But from what I've seen, the only real failures people have been in the early model cheaper AR-15s. And I don't know if they're using reloads when it happens. I don't know if they're using the M855 rounds when they weren't supposed to. But I'm guessing that the regular AR-15 ammo that came out originally is the same, civilian side and military side. I think it's the newer stuff that's going to be a problem in the older chambers. I know if you get like a Henry rifle and some other stuff, they're made with tighter 223 chambers. If you end up shooting those, you're probably going to have a problem to extract the 5.56 rounds because they do expand a bit more and there are some more forgiving areas in it. And we'll get into some annealing and some stuff, I guess, in other videos and everything. But I hope this gets you thinking about it. And maybe someone out there does know the answer. Appreciate it very much. Cav Cop out.